So, welcome back. We've been talking about a lot of different things today, including the president's position on Israel and this UN resolution. To me, that was a step too far, what they did there. But it's also speaks to my long-running complaint about the foreign policy of this administration and what they have wrought over the last 7 years through Barack Obama's hand and through Hillary Clinton's hand at state, and where that was all coming from. We're joined right now by Dr. Ann Pierce, who has written a book called A Perilous Path: The Misguided Foreign Policy of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John Kerry. Dr. Pierce, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much. And I know that in addition to being the author of this book, you are an analyst of defense policies and foreign policies around the country. What motivated you to write A Perilous Path?
Yeah, well, I wasn't planning on writing this book, but as I saw the foreign policy of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton being articulated and put into place, I became so concerned that I finally had to write this book. And then as John Kerry continued the trend, I ended up continuing on till the second term. So it was a almost 7-year project. And what concerned me so much was that they were rejecting our best foreign policy traditions that emphasize peace through strength and human rights. And they were downgrading our defenses, de-emphasizing our ideals, reaching out to the world's worst dictators and offering to negotiate with them without any preconditions. And, of course, something we're so aware of now, they were inadequately focused on growing threats from hostile regime and extremist groups. So the result of all this, I show in A Perilous Path, is we have a world that is much more hostile and much more oppressive. So my book, I try to point us back toward our best foreign policy traditions while at the same time hoping that we can once again learn from our own mistakes.
You know, when it comes to human rights, it's certainly been a willingness to look the other way where it fit the administration's needs. I don't know if that's unique to this administration, but you certainly saw it in places in the Middle East, also most recently in Cuba.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the way I describe this foreign policy is that Obama, Clinton, and Kerry treated enemies and adversaries generously while treating democratic allies and pro-democracy groups ungenerously. And as you said, in Cuba, Syria, the Iran resistance movement, just about anywhere you look around the world, human rights groups were snubbed. You can go all the way back to Clinton's first tour in Asia, where she pretty much made it clear that we were going to describe China as our most important strategic partner and that we were willing to ignore human rights for the sake of that goal. Well, we can see how well that has all turned out. And the reason I begin my book with a look back at World War II and the Cold War is that this idea that we can ignore atrocities while only focusing narrowly on defense didn't work out well. And we learned that in World War II the hard way. And we learned that, when you bury your head in the sand in the face of escalating atrocities, weapons programs, and hostilities, that only increases the chance that we'll be forced into war by events spiraling out of control. And I think that idea of burying our head in the sand and also reaching out to dictators really defines Obama, Clinton, Kerry foreign policy.
Yeah, and fitting that you mentioned that you kind of led with that in your book, because December 31st will mark roughly the 25th anniversary of the end of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to believe it's been that long.
It really is.
But we've sort of moved away from the kind of foreign policy, the peace through strength that you mentioned. That was certainly the policy of Ronald Reagan. Do you have a sense that we'll see more of that we'll move back toward that under Trump, or do you have your concerns with the Trump presidency?
I do think that with a Trump presidency, it's definitely likely that we will take a stronger stand for most of our allies. and against most of our adversaries. There's no question we're going to build up our defenses and return to a robust military modernization program, which is so important when you look at Russia and China and others charging ahead with their modernization programs, and Iran and North Korea being ever closer to becoming serious nuclear powers. So that's so important. But one thing that has concerned me about Trump all along are his sometimes positive statements about dictators, and particularly Vladimir Putin, because we have a resurgent Russia, which has also proved how cruel it is in Syria. And we have now Secretary of State Tillerson, who his own friends say is probably the best, the man closest of all people in the United States to Putin. So my big wish is that Tillerson will put the same enthusiasm and passion into being the head of the State Department that he put into being the head of Exxon.
Right.
And that once he is in that role, he will reevaluate his, what I see is pro-Russian trends. I mean, he did disagree with sanctions against Russia on Ukraine, for example. So I am really hoping that once Trump and Tillerson get in there and look at the reality of this intransigent and resurgent Russia, really so much more powerful than when Obama, Clinton, and Kerry came into office, that they will reassess their pro-Russian leanings.
We're talking to Dr. Ann Pierce, who's written a book called A Perilous Path, talking about the foreign policy of the Obama administration. On the UN resolution that was passed on Friday, where the U.S. Actively decided to abstain, do you believe that was an intentional act in terms of Israel accusing the U.S. of intentionally sort of planting this idea and then abstaining to make sure that the resolution got through?
You know, I do. I think it very much fits the Obama, Clinton, Kerry pattern of snubbing our allies. And Israel all along has been treated particularly disdainfully. I mean, back in the Clinton years in the State Department, you can recall that when they were pushing so-called peace negotiations between Israel and Palestine, they stated all their preconditions for Israel up front, while stating no preconditions for the Palestinians, which of course rigged the system against Israel right from the beginning. And now you see this Security Council vote condemning Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and even giving individual nations carte blanche to legislate their own sanctions against Israel. As I said, it fits this pattern of snubbing our allies and being particularly disrespectful to our longtime ally, Israel.
Well, there's no doubt about that. As we've been talking about that on the show all afternoon, I'm just stunned at what they've done here, and really can't wait for the new administration to get in power in 25 days and kind of set a new course, and hopefully one that's backing Israel again, as we've done all these years. Dr. Ann Pierce, thank you so much for your time. The book is called A Perilous Path, The Misguided Foreign Policy of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John Kerry. You can buy it on Amazon. It is available right now. And Dr. Pierce, thank you. I'd love to have you on again sometime.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time. How fitting that she's written that book that just sort of outlines exactly what we've talked about, right? I mean, I love it when people are smart enough to agree with me. Just teasing. Her foreign policy traditions, kind of snubbing what we've done in the past, and ignoring human rights when it fits their agenda. Liberals do that all the time. That's not a surprise.